I want you to just step into a very specific kind of reality with me for a second.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, imagine walking into a room. The air around you isn't just empty space. It is, I mean, it's quite literally humming with potential.
Right, just buzzing.
Exactly. In this world, energy isn't some scarce resource that you have to, you know, desperately dig out of the ground.
Or painstakingly manufactured in a plant somewhere.
Yeah, it is everywhere. It is rippling all around you, constantly in motion, just waiting for someone to learn how to catch it.
It's an incredible image.
It really is. Welcome to the world of Nikola Tesla. Today on our deep dive, we are taking a stack of incredible sources, so his personal journals, extensive biographical research, and his own really intricate technical writings.
Right.
And our mission is to uncover not just what he built, but how his mind actually worked.
And to do that properly,
Yeah.
I think we need to set a firm ground rule right away for how we're approaching these sources.
Yeah, definitely.
We're not treating this like a dusty history lesson today.
No, not at all.
We are stepping into an active, living worldview. This is a timeless cognitive space.
Yeah.
We are looking at a world where the future can actually be seen, provided you are willing to construct it in your mind first.
Okay, so let's unpack this living worldview. Because if we are entering this space, we first have to understand the architecture. Like, what does this world fundamentally believe about reality itself?
Well, it clearly doesn't view the physical world the way most of us do.
Right.
To understand the architecture of this reality, you really have to grasp its foundational rule, which is this world is connected entirely by invisible forces.
Invisible forces.
Yeah. People who live in this worldview, they do not just look at the surface of objects.
Yeah.
Like if they look at a copper wire, they don't just see a piece of metal sitting on a table.
They see the magnetic fields wrapping around
Exactly. They are constantly aware of currents, of frequencies, and of this profound interconnectedness that simply doesn't register to the naked eye.
They view the entire Earth not as a massive ball of dirt, but as
a vibrating conductor.
Right. So if the fundamental rule of this reality is that everything is connected by invisible forces, I feel like the immediate problem is interaction.
How do you mean?
Well, how do you manipulate or test or, build with something you literally cannot physically see?
Oh, right. Well, you use the most powerful analytical tool available in this space, which is imagination.
Okay.
But we really need to define that carefully. Because the way we casually use that word today...
Like daydreaming.
Yeah, exactly, daydreaming. That does not apply here. In this world, imagination is not daydreaming.
Right.
It has absolutely nothing to do with idle fantasy or escaping reality.
It's not a fairy tale.
No. Here, imagination is considered a literal form of scientific seeing.
Yeah.
It is a highly disciplined engineering space.
In one of the biographies we looked at, it detailed how he would build entire motors in his head.
Yes.
And not just the concept, the actual mechanical device. It's like, think of a software developer running a highly complex simulation.
That's a great analogy.
When a coder writes a program, they aren't making up a story. They are building a precise, logical architecture.
Right, they can see the logic executing.
Yeah, the loops running, all before a single line of code is ever compiled into a visual interface. It's a precise rendering of a reality that just hasn't been printed yet.
Exactly.
But applying that to physical machinery is just staggering to me.
It is staggering, and it relies on an incredible degree of cognitive discipline.
Yeah.
This process is often referred to as an eidetic memory, but applied specifically to physics and engineering.
Wow.
When he imagined a motor, he didn't just picture its external shape. He would assemble the parts in his mind, and then he would mentally turn it on.
He would literally let the machine run in his mind.
Yes. The imagination isn't a place to escape. It is the laboratory where reality is stress-tested. He would let this mental machine run for weeks in his imagination,
Right.
weeks. And then he would mentally take it apart to check the internal parts for wear and tear.
That just shifts the entire paradigm of how we think about invention. I mean, he is checking for friction on a bearing that doesn't physically exist yet.
Exactly. He is identifying where the metal would warp based on the invisible forces of heat and kinetic energy.
That's wild.
By the time a physical tool is finally picked up in this world, the invention is already finished.
So the physical building phase is essentially just
a transcription.
A transcription of the mental truth.
Precisely. In his worldview, an idea must be fully constructed, subjected to stresses, and perfected entirely in the mind before anyone even touches a physical workbench.
Which brings us to the operating system of this world, I think. Because if you treat your mind as a rigorous physics engine, the actual process of processing data and getting things done has to look completely different from the norm.
Oh, it fundamentally changes how you process information.
Right. Like, how does someone actually function day to day with that massive level of cognitive load?
Well, for starters, people in this world view it almost exclusively in images, not sentences.
The image.
Yeah, words are considered too slow and entirely too clumsy for the work being done.
Because words force you into a linear path. You don't have to read or speak one concept after another, left to right in a straight line.
Precisely. Words are linear. But complex systems, especially those dealing with alternating currents, shifting magnetic fields, resonance, they do not operate in a straight line.
Everything is happening at once.
Exactly. In a dynamic system, everything happens simultaneously. If you think in linear words, you can only track one piece of the machine at a time.
Like trying to understand a symphony by reading the sheet music for each instrument one by one.
That's a perfect way to put it. But if you think in images, you can hold an entire rotating, functioning system in your mind at once.
To hear the whole symphony.
You see how a magnetic field on the left pushes a coil on the right simultaneously.
But like holding all those variables at once, keeping the symphony playing in your head without losing the tempo, that requires a level of mental bandwidth that seems almost impossible to sustain consciously.
It is impossible to sustain purely consciously. And that leads to the next core operational rule. In this world, people trust their intuition exactly as much as their calculation.
Now, wait. Trusting intuition as much as hard math?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to push back on that a little bit.
Go for it.
Because if you are designing high-voltage electrical systems, going with your, gut feeling sounds like a remarkably fast way to electrocute yourself. You can't just guess when you're dealing with physics.
You are absolutely right. You can never guess.
Right.
But we need to redefine intuition to really understand this worldview.
Okay.
In this space, intuition is not some random emotional feeling. It is the result of deep, relentless observation.
So it's not a guess?
Not at all. Because the mind is constantly observing and absorbing data about these invisible forces, studying how electricity arcs, how frequencies resonate. The brain is recognizing patterns at lightning speed.
Oh, I see. So it's subconscious pattern recognition. The brain is doing the math. It's just doing it faster than the conscious mind can articulate.
Exactly. Think of a professional baseball outfielder catching a fly ball.
Okay.
They don't pull out a calculator to compute the wind speed, the trajectory, and the velocity of the ball, right?
Right. They just run.
Their brain does complex calculus intuitively based on years of observing the physics of moving objects. They just run to where the ball is going to land.
So intuition here is the subconscious handing you the final output of a massive calculation.
Yes, before your conscious mind has time to write out the equation on a chalkboard.
So the math is happening behind the scenes, and the intuition is just the final alert.
Yeah. And once you trust that output, you can follow the strict blueprint of how this world grows.
The blueprint.
Because it relies so heavily on visual thinking and deep pattern recognition, the process of innovation follows a very specific sequence. It is an unbroken chain.
Walk me through it.
First, a question appears, usually a problem regarding energy or transmission.
Okay.
Second, a vision forms, that complete, fully realized image of the solution in the mind.
Got it.
Third, the experiment begins. But remember, this experiment happens entirely in the mental laboratory.
So question appears, vision forms, mental experiment begins.
Right. Fourth, the idea transmits. It is brought out of the mind and into the physical environment.
Then fifth?
And fifth, the world changes. That is the exact sequence. It is a direct translation from the invisible to the visible.
I mean, we see this sequence perfectly in the sources regarding his development of alternating current.
Absolutely.
Like, he saw the problem with direct current. It was linear, couldn't travel far without losing power.
Right. That was the question appearing.
Then he envisioned the rotating magnetic field to solve it. He tested the motor mentally, checking for wear and tear.
The mental experiment.
Yeah. Then he transmitted the idea into a physical prototype, and he completely rewired how the globe receives power. It's almost like a mantra for this entire reality. See the future. Build the future. Power the future.
That is the perfect summary of the operating system.
Yeah.
But if we connect this cognitive process to the bigger picture, we have to look at the people running this system.
Right, the human element.
Because living in a mental laboratory changes how you interact with everything else.
It has to. Living with this specific operating system where you see fields no one else sees and you test machines in a space no one else can visit, that has to create a totally unique set of desires.
Oh, definitely.
And frankly, it must create a massive amount of friction with the rest of society.
The friction is immense, and it stems from what people in this world actually want.
Mm.
Their core desires are just fundamentally different from typical human ambitions.
So,
People here do not want to make trivial tweaks to existing products.
Mm.
They are not interested in incremental improvements or, making a process 5% more efficient.
they want to solve the problems that everyone else ignores because they seem too daunting.
Exactly. They are aiming for the structural foundation. They want to alter the very nature of how humans interact with the world and its energy.
That is huge.
Yes. And another crucial desire is that they deeply want to be understood for their ideas rather than their personality. In a world driven by pure visions and the mechanics of invisible forces, a charismatic personality is just a distraction.
It doesn't matter.
Right. The physical idea, the functioning system, is the only truth that matters.
That is a stark contrast to how so many people operate, like where presentation, personal branding, charisma, they often completely overshadow the actual engineering or the utility of the idea itself.
It's true. But pursuing that pure, unvarnished truth carries a very heavy cost.
Working alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To maintain the integrity of the vision, they almost always work alone.
I am really glad you brought this up because this quietly challenges a massive assumption we carry around today.
What's that?
We have this pervasive idea that great work must be highly collaborative.
Right.
Like we are constantly told that you need a dynamic team, you need a whiteboard brainstorming session, and you need instant peer validation to prove an idea is viable.
But in this specific worldview, collaboration is often seen as a threat to the vision.
Really? A threat?
Think about the cognitive load of visual thinking we just discussed. If you are the only one who can see the completed rotating simulation in your mind, trying to explain it to a committee who only sees empty air is an exercise in futility.
Right.
It doesn't refine the idea, it dilutes it.
It's like trying to explain a three-dimensional object to someone who only understands two dimensions.
That's a great way to look at it.
You don't work alone out of some antisocial bitterness or, because you despise people. You work alone simply because the future you see clearly doesn't make sense to them yet.
It just doesn't.
When you try to explain a multi-directional alternating system to people who have spent their entire lives fully invested in a single-direction linear system, it just sounds like noise.
That is a perfect way to describe the friction. They are speaking a language of the future to people who only speak the present.
Wow.
And because they are speaking a language no one else understands, they operate on completely altered timelines.
Altered timelines.
Yeah, people in this world will pursue an idea far longer than society considers normal or healthy.
Well, because they don't need the external validation to know the idea works. They already check the bearings in their mental simulation.
Exactly. The internal proof is absolute.
Right.
The mental proof is so mathematically sound that the lack of physical proof in the immediate term or the lack of social acceptance doesn't deter them at all.
They just keep going.
They will hold on to a vision for years, sometimes decades, while the rest of the world slowly catches up to the reality they already built in their head.
Okay, but this raises a really critical question about sustainability, like the engine of progress here.
Sure.
If you are working alone, speaking a language others think is noise, and pursuing an idea for decades without any social validation, how does this worldview not collapse?
That's tough.
Like, how does a person not just descend into absolute frustration and give up?
Well, it requires a very specific kind of fuel to sustain this worldview. It relies on a brand of curiosity that completely ignores convention. It literally does not care how things have always been done.
Right.
But more importantly, it relies on a fierce persistence.
Mm-hmm.
And not just typical stubbornness or a strong work ethic. It is a persistence specifically designed to survive disbelief.
Designed to survive disbelief. That is a vital distinction. Because disbelief is the default reaction.
Always.
When you propose pulling energy from the ambient air, the default human reaction is heavy skepticism.
Oh, definitely. The persistence required here isn't just about putting in long hours in a physical lab. It is about maintaining the structural integrity of your internal vision when the external world is screaming that you are wrong.
Wow.
It requires completely decoupling your intellectual self-worth from societal approval.
So what keeps their feet on the ground then? If you are living entirely in your mental laboratory, completely ignoring convention and decoupling from societal feedback, what stops you from just drifting off into pure madness?
That's the danger.
Like, how do you ensure you are building real physics and not just science fiction?
What keeps this worldview grounded is the ultimate requirement of the vision itself. The ideas being pursued must solve real human problems.
Ah, okay.
It's never just vision for vision's sake. It's not art for art's sake. The invisible forces must be harnessed to power the future of humanity.
Utility.
Ultimate utility is the anchor.
So human impact is the tether that keeps the mental simulation tied to the physical world. If it doesn't solve a problem for humanity, the simulation is useless.
Exactly. And because that anchor is real, human impact, this world operates under one ultimate defining principle.
Okay, what is it?
This is the core rule that makes everything else possible. The impossible is simply a delayed invention.
Oh, I love that. The impossible is simply a delayed invention. Think about how radically that changes your day-to-day mindset.
It's massive.
For most people, impossible is a brick wall. We hit that word, we pack up our tools, we assume we've failed, and we go find a different, easier project.
It marks the definitive end of the road.
But in this worldview, impossible isn't a dead end. It's just a lack of data. It's a scheduling issue.
A scheduling issue, exactly.
If something is impossible, it just means you haven't observed the invisible forces long enough. You haven't recognized the pattern yet. You haven't built the correct mental simulation.
Right.
The invention is on its way. It just hasn't arrived in the physical world yet.
That shift from a defensive posture, trying to protect yourself from failure, to an active, aggressive posture, is exactly why this worldview generates such massive leaps forward.
It's so empowering.
When you remove the concept of permanent impossibility, failure isn't an identity. It's just a temporary state of not having enough information. The only variables left are time and imagination.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? We've explored the architecture of reality here, from recognizing the invisible forces connecting everything to the staggering cognitive load of visual thinking.
Yeah, and we've seen the cost of working alone, the decoupling from social validation.
And the fierce persistence required to survive disbelief. Let's bring all these concepts together.
If we synthesize everything we've pulled from these journals and writings, the ultimate truth of this world comes down to one big idea: the vision.
The vision.
The future is not something we wait for. It is not something that passively arrives on our doorstep while we sit back. The future is something we can see right now, if we are willing to look far enough and build it rigorously in our minds.
And here is the most important takeaway, I think. This worldview is not locked away. We are not talking about a magical realm that disappeared. This is a cognitive space you can enter today.
Right now.
You can step into this worldview right now by applying imagination as scientific seeing to your next coding project, your next architectural design, or your next strategy.
Absolutely.
You can trust your intuition when you know your subconscious has done the math through years of observation. You can look for the invisible connections between the systems around you instead of just staring at the surface. And you can hold on to a good idea far longer than society tells you is normal because you have already stress tested it in your mind. The tools of this world relentless observation, disciplined imagination, and a persistence designed to survive disbelief, they're completely available to anyone willing to practice them.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the challenges you are facing right now, where the walls in your industry you've been told are permanent.
Those impossible walls.
Yeah. If you could clearly see one piece of the future right now, what impossible idea would you start building today?